My name is Ivanka Harris, and this is the story of how the man I loved left me for my sister. But that's not the end. Not even close. Because years later, on the day I finally said I do to someone who saw my worth, he walked into my wedding. And what happened next left everyone in shock. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about rebirth, grace, and reclaiming your voice in the face of silence. If you've ever been broken by someone you trusted, or had to rise while others hoped you'd fall, this one's for you. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe in quiet strength and poetic justice, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Now breathe in, and let's begin. Don't worry, he won't make a scene, my fiancé whispered, squeezing my hand beneath the table. But I wasn't worried about a scene. I was worried about the silence. Because across the ballroom, dressed in the same navy suit he wore the day he left me, sat the man I once thought I'd marry. And beside him, wearing ivory when she damn well knew the dress code was black tie, was my sister. His date. Not his wife. Not even his fiancée. Just his date. Like this was casual. Like what they did to me wasn't brutal. The string quartet played something elegant and old money, but all I heard was the pulse in my ears. I'd handpicked the guest list. Every name, every seat, every placement card. And yet here he was, Mason Whitmore, uninvited, unbothered, with Eliza, my younger sister, looking smug as ever with that practiced, doe-eyed innocence. I raised my champagne glass to my lips to keep my hand from trembling. The bubbles bit down my throat as the MC tapped the mic and welcomed everyone to the reception. No one else knew. They thought Eliza had brought a friend. They didn't recognize him. Or maybe they did and assumed we were all civil now. Southern etiquette has a way of glossing over blood and betrayal, wrapping trauma in white linen and floral centerpieces. But I knew. And he knew I knew. That's why he came. That's why he stared. Like he was waiting to see if I'd flinch. If I'd break. Let me take you back. Back to the soft-burning August night in Nashville, when everything still made sense. I was 35. Mason and I had just celebrated 3 years together, and I was almost certain he'd propose by the fall. He was quiet, thoughtful, and knew the exact way I took my coffee. We shared books, playlists, a joint bank account, and one dog named Bentley. I thought that meant we shared a future too, but love doesn't always scream before it dies. Sometimes it just drifts. Silent. Like smoke under a door you didn't notice was burning. I missed the signs. I'll own that. I missed how he'd started staying later at the office, how he stopped asking me to cook my Sunday chili, how he flinched, ever so slightly, when I mentioned my sister's name. Eliza was everything I wasn't. Younger, wilder, an expert at arriving late and stealing all the oxygen in the room. She had this way of turning chaos into charm, of making you feel like a background character in your own life. She visited Nashville that spring, just for a weekend, she said. A weekend turned into 3 months. And in those 3 months, Mason changed. He started defending her, even when she was clearly wrong, shrugging off her messes like they were cute, laughing a little too hard when she rolled her eyes at my Type A plans. The first time I walked in on them alone, they jumped. That should have been it. That should have been enough. But I still believed in people's better angels back then. I still gave grace like water. I still thought love could survive a few bruises. Until the night he left. No warning, no yelling, just a neatly typed letter on my kitchen counter. I remember reading it while my chili burned on the stove. I can't lie to you anymore, Ivanka, it said. I think I'm in love with your sister. The memory tastes metallic even now. He moved out the next day. Eliza followed him a week later. No apologies, just a quick text that said, I didn't plan for this to happen. And just like that, they vanished. No contact, no family dinners, no Christmas cards. My parents refused to choose sides, but I made it easy for them. I chose silence. It took me years to rebuild. Years to stop waking up angry. to stop rehearsing what I'd say if I ever saw either of them again. And then, on a rainy Tuesday in March, I met David. He wasn't flashy. He didn't sweep in like a storm. He showed up slow, like morning light. Patient. Kind. The kind of man who opens car doors and listens with his whole face. He was the first man who didn't ask me to shrink. Who didn't look at my ambition like it was competition. He didn't just fall in love with me. He respected me. That's why I said yes. That's why this wedding was more than vows and rings. It was a full circle moment. It was proof that you could lose everything and still rise. So when I saw Mason walk into the reception uninvited, part of me didn't panic. Part of me wanted him to see this. Wanted him to sit in the ruins he created and realize I'd built something beautiful out of them. But I hadn't expected him to come with her. I hadn't expected Eliza to look at me like she still owned the room. They didn't eat much during dinner. He pushed his fillet around the plate. She played with her wine glass. Neither of them clapped during the toasts. But they watched. Oh, they watched. Especially when David stood and raised his glass to me. "Ivanka is the most extraordinary woman I've ever met," he said, voice steady, eyes locked on mine. "She taught me what real love looks like, what strength sounds like when it's quiet, and what it means to build a life with intention." I smiled at him. Then slowly I turned my head and locked eyes with Mason. That's when I saw it, the flicker, the regret. He didn't smile, he didn't blink. He just sat there, a shadow of the man I once adored, realizing, too late, what he'd thrown away. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because the real moment, the one no one saw coming, wasn't the fact that they showed up. It was what happened when the first dance began. When the room dimmed and the spotlight hit the dance floor. When David extended his hand to me, and someone else stepped forward instead. Before the letter on the counter. Before the secondhand betrayal that gutted my family. Before the wedding dress and the soft jazz and the man who rewrote the ending. There was just us, me and Mason. And it was good, on the surface. I was 35, working as an interior designer in a cozy little studio off 12th Avenue. My business had just started taking off, and I was finally at the point where I could be selective with clients. No more fixing up investment properties for men who wanted clean beige and high ROI. I was designing dream homes, nurseries, personal libraries, spaces with stories. Mason was a software developer, remote for a firm out in Austin, polished, neat, and always a little quiet, like he had a secret but not the bad kind, the kind that made you lean in closer. We had a rhythm. Mornings were coffee with oat milk and a shared crossword. Evenings were dinner on the balcony, wine if we weren't too tired. Fridays we walked Bentley around Radnor Lake. Sundays I cooked chili, my mom's recipe, and we'd curl up on the couch, legs tangled, watching old Cary Grant movies. He wasn't flashy, didn't fill a room with noise or sparkle, but he had steadiness, dependability. And after dating a long line of musicians, dreamers, and commitment phobes, that felt like gold. We were 5 years in, living together. He'd met my parents, my friends adored him. The whispers had already started. "When's the ring?" And I was ready. I had dreams of a wedding under the magnolias, a little craftsman home with a wraparound porch, maybe one baby, maybe two, a life built brick by brick, peaceful and soft. But the thing about peace is, you don't always notice when it's been replaced by performance. Looking back, there were signs. They weren't loud. They didn't wave red flags in my face. They whispered. They lingered. Mason started pulling away in small, almost imperceptible ways. At first, he blamed work, a new client, more hours. He stopped doing the crossword, stopped asking me how my projects were going. When I told him I landed a celebrity client for a nursery renovation, an actual country music star, he barely looked up from his laptop, just muttered, "That's nice, babe." He never used to call me babe. I chalked it up to stress, to routines getting stale. I planned a weekend getaway to Asheville. Just us, no phones. We spent most of it in silence. I remember thinking maybe we'd just outgrown the honeymoon phase. Maybe real love looked more like parallel lives with compatible Wi-Fi. But the one thing that stayed was Sunday chili. Even if we weren't talking, I still made it. It felt like glue, a tradition, something solid in the shifting. And then Eliza came. She was only supposed to be visiting for a weekend. A breakup had shattered her latest situationship with a DJ from Miami. My mother, in her usual guilt-laced voice, asked if I could take her in for a bit until she finds her footing. So I did, because I'm the older sister, the stable one, the one who always makes room. Eliza breezed in with 3 overstuffed suitcases, a leopard print coat, and a trail of vanilla perfume. Her voice was always too loud, her laugh a bit forced. But she had that thing. That chaos people mistook for charm. The first night, she played our piano barefoot and told Mason he looked like a man who read Russian novels in college. He blushed. I remember blinking. Mason never blushed. The next morning, I found them making breakfast together. She'd poured him orange juice. He'd made her eggs. They were laughing at something. She didn't make eye contact with me. I brushed it off. I always brushed it off. Over the next few weeks, the house changed. She moved from the guest room to the sunroom, then to the couch. She had trouble sleeping alone. She asked to borrow my clothes, then forgot to give them back. She started inserting herself into things, joining us on date nights, jumping into our conversations, sitting on the arm of Mason's chair when we watched movies. Mason said nothing. When I brought it up, he shrugged. She's going through a lot. Be patient. When I tried to set boundaries, can you please not invite her on our anniversary dinner? He gave me a look I didn't recognize. Like I was being difficult. Like I was ruining the fun. She's your sister, he said. Where's the compassion? That was the moment something shifted. Not in the house. In me. I started doubting myself. I started wondering if maybe I was the one making things worse by noticing. Maybe I was too controlling, too suspicious, too aware. The lie I held on to, the assumption I built my peace on, was this. If you are steady, loyal, and kind, people will be too. That belief carried me through years of disappointments. It made me generous. It made me forgiving. It also made me blind. Because the truth is, not everyone respects kindness. Some people see it as a currency to exploit. Some see your loyalty as a leash they can slip off when something shinier walks in. And Eliza? She never liked being second. When we were kids, I won spelling bees. She faked fevers on competition days. I got a scholarship to design school. She dropped out in protest. I was always the one our parents called when things went wrong. She was the one they coddled. But I never thought she'd turn that envy into a weapon. Not until she did. It happened a month before he left. I came home early from a client consult. The sunroom door was open. I heard murmurs. 2 voices, one deeper, one breathier. When I walked in, they jumped apart. Mason had that guilty look, like a boy caught smoking. Eliza turned away, smiling into her phone. I was just asking him about computer stuff, she said. Mason didn't say anything. I stood there, frozen, and heard my own voice ask if we were still having chili that night. We did. I stirred the pot. He set the table. She poured the wine. It was normal. Too normal. Later that night, I sat in the bathtub and cried without knowing exactly why. It wasn't just fear. It was grief. The kind you feel before the loss is official. The kind your body registers before your mind allows it. 3 weeks later, he left. Left the house, left the dog, left the life we built. Took only a suitcase and his guitar. He didn't say goodbye. Just a letter on the counter. And silence. I thought I'd break. But I didn't. I sobbed. I screamed. I didn't eat for 2 days. Then I got up. I went to work. I walked Bentley. I lived. I didn't chase. I didn't beg. And when Eliza sent her text, I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't reply. That silence became my salvation. I stopped explaining myself to people who never really listened. I took on bigger clients, redesigned my brand, won an award for Best Southern Design Studio. I cut my hair, learned to dance, changed the locks. I started again. And one day, while helping a friend design the layout for a fundraiser, I met David. Tall, thoughtful, eyes like early morning sky. A widower, a father, a man who asked real questions and waited for the answers. He wasn't trying to be impressive. He was trying to be real. And when he held me, really held me, I didn't feel like I needed to prove my worth. I just was. That's what made Mason's reappearance so jolting. He'd ghosted 5 years of my life, and yet there he was at my wedding, looking like the past never happened, like a guest crashing a life he forfeited. But this time, I wasn't that girl anymore, and he wasn't the man I remembered. The man who once looked like peace, now looked like punishment. It happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were quiet in our house. No deliveries, no design consults. Mason usually worked from home, which meant background jazz, low lighting, and the hum of his keyboard drifting down the hallway. That day, I came home early. The nursery install had finished ahead of schedule, and I had a surprise. Croissants from his favorite place in Franklin, and a bottle of Bordeaux I'd been saving since our anniversary. The house was silent when I walked in. No jazz, no keyboard. Just the soft hiss of the faucet. I turned the corner into the kitchen and stopped. There was Eliza, at the stove, stirring chili, wearing my apron, wearing his t-shirt, barefoot, humming like she belonged there. I didn't even notice Mason at first. He was at the table, scrolling his phone, looking up at her like she was the whole damn sky. She turned and froze. I did too. I don't remember what I said, or if I said anything. The croissants slid from my hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. No one moved. Finally, she spoke. "I was just helping with dinner," she said, smiling small, eyes flickering. "We didn't know you'd be home this early." Helping. She said it like it was nothing, like it was normal to cook dinner in your sister's home, in your sister's clothes, with the man your sister loved. I looked at Mason. He didn't stand up. He didn't speak. He just stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. That was when I knew. That moment. That silence. It was already done. The letter came 2 days later. Typed, printed, left on the kitchen counter, as if that made it noble. Clean. "Ivanka, I need to be honest with you." That was the first line. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "You deserve more." Just a coward's confession dressed in passive voice. I haven't been happy for a long time. It wasn't planned. I think I'm in love with Eliza. I read it standing in the kitchen, the kettle screaming behind me. I didn't turn it off, didn't blink. I just stood there until the steam blurred my vision and my fingers went numb from gripping the page. Bentley, our dog, sat by my feet, confused, tail low, sensing a rupture. I slid down the cabinet and sobbed until my throat was raw. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. For 3 days I barely moved. The bed swallowed me. I didn't eat, I didn't shower. I watched dust dance in the sunlight and wondered how the world kept going, how grocery stores stayed open, how birds still sang. My phone buzzed nonstop. My mother, my best friend Georgia, a dozen unread texts. I turned it face down. I didn't want to explain what I didn't understand. I didn't want to hear "you're strong" or "he's not worth it," because I didn't feel strong. I felt like a ghost wearing my own skin. At night, I lay awake reliving everything. Every Sunday chili, every coffee run, every moment he kissed me and pretended he hadn't already left. My mind turned traitor, looping imaginary scenes of them laughing behind my back, touching when I wasn't looking, building a secret world inside the walls of mine. And yet, there were moments I still missed him. Isn't that the cruelest part? You grieve even the person who wrecked you. I'd lie in bed, hating him, and still wonder if he ate dinner, if he missed the sound of Bentley snoring, if he ever looked back. That's the thing about grief. It's not linear. It spirals. It contradicts. I hated him. I wanted him back. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to explain. But more than anything, I wanted to stop hurting. Eventually, the calls stopped. Georgia came over and sat in silence beside me for hours, just holding my hand. She was the only one I let see me undone. Everyone else got the brave face. The autopilot. I lost weight. Fast. I told clients I had the flu. I threw myself into work. Not because it helped, but because it was the only thing I could still control. My projects became perfect, pristine. Not a single misplaced throw pillow. Not one smudge on a backsplash. But inside, I was crumbling. I didn't go to family dinners. Didn't speak to my parents for 6 weeks. My mom tried to keep things neutral, called it unfortunate, like my life had been mildly inconvenienced. "She's still your sister," she said once. And I hung up without responding. Because what do you call someone who raised your life and smiled while doing it? What do you call family that doesn't flinch when you're bleeding? The lowest moment came one Sunday evening. I had just come home from a renovation consult. Tired. Hollow. I walked in and instinctively called out, "Mason?" The silence that answered me was so loud it felt personal. I stood in the hallway and stared at the closed door of the guest room, where Eliza had stayed, where the whole unraveling began, and I lost it. I tore open the door and started throwing everything out. Pillows, sheets, her old makeup bag, a scarf she left behind, even a pair of Mason's socks. I threw them all into the hallway like they were poison. And then I curled up in the center of that stripped-down bed and wept like I was dying. Because in a way, I was. The version of me that trusted everyone, that believed love meant loyalty, that thought family would always choose you. She was gone. What remained was raw, angry, and painfully awake. And yet, in the ashes, something else stirred. It didn't come quickly. It started as tiny flickers. Days where I could laugh without flinching. Moments where I admired my own work. Seconds where I felt proud for simply getting up and showing up. There was no switch. No epiphany. Just breath. One after the other. Georgia dragged me to a grief support group. Mostly widows and cancer survivors. I didn't speak the first 3 sessions. But listening helped. Seeing women stitch themselves back together after unthinkable loss helped. And somewhere in those rooms, I stopped seeing myself as abandoned, and started seeing myself as free. I cut my hair, not for reinvention, for relief. I moved my studio into a bigger space with skylights. I hired an assistant. I painted the sunroom, navy blue, covered every trace. I walked Bentley every day and started smiling back at strangers. Not because I was ready, but because I had no choice but to move forward. Then one day I was at a fundraiser, helping redesign a silent auction display for a nonprofit. That's when I met David. Not flashy, not poetic. He spilled his coffee on a brochure and apologized 4 different ways. But his eyes lingered, not in a predatory way, in a careful, observing way. He wasn't trying to impress me, he was trying to see me. And slowly, so slowly, I let myself be seen. But that moment in the kitchen, that letter on the counter, it never left me. It became part of my DNA. And I carried it quietly all the way to the altar. Because no matter how much you heal, you always remember who handed you the knife. People like to romanticize heartbreak. They think it's long walks, sad music, and eventually, some glorious glow-up. But the truth? It's a wilderness. Dry, directionless, repetitive. You wake up in the same aching skin every day, hoping the fog feels a little lighter. Sometimes it does. Most days it doesn't. After Mason left, I tried to rebuild. I said the right things, smiled on cue, took the projects, watered the plants, brushed my hair. But inside, I was ash. I told myself I was strong, that I didn't need closure, that I was better off. Then I started drinking wine at lunch. Just one glass at first. But it softened the edges. And soft edges were easier to survive than jagged truth. Georgia noticed. She always notices. She came by one Friday afternoon and found me half asleep on the couch with an untouched client draft on the coffee table and a bottle of Merlot 2/3 gone. She didn't say anything. She just picked up Bentley's leash and looked at me with those quiet, knowing eyes. "Come on," she said. "Get up." She dragged me to therapy that Monday. I didn't want to go. The word alone made me feel broken. I wasn't the kind of woman who needed therapy. I was composed. Independent. I had spreadsheets for my spreadsheets. But sitting in that small beige office with the smell of eucalyptus and the sound of someone else's tears through the thin wall, I cracked. The therapist's name was Alina. Mid-40s. Sharp cheekbones and a voice like a lullaby that had seen war. She didn't ask about Mason at first. She asked about me. What I wanted. What I feared. What I believed about love. And when I told her the story, how he left me for my sister, how no one stopped it, how I kept showing up to a world that no longer fit, she didn't say, "That's awful," or "You'll get through this." She said, "You're grieving an identity, not just a relationship." And just like that, the floor dropped out. Because that was it. I didn't miss Mason. Not really. I missed who I thought I was with him. Who I thought I'd become. I missed the dream, the story, the woman who thought she was safe. And now? I didn't know who I was without all that scaffolding. So I spiraled a bit. I ghosted friends, said no to baby showers and brunches, started a rebound with a charming realtor who looked good in photos and felt hollow in person. He never asked about my work, called me baby instead of my name. I let it go on for 3 months. Because loneliness makes you generous with your standards, and pain makes you pretend. But rock bottom didn't come with a scream. It came with a mirror. I was brushing my teeth one morning, eyes still puffy from crying the night before, when I caught my reflection, and didn't recognize her. I looked tired, small, diminished. The spark behind my eyes, the thing that made me, was gone. And I whispered, "This isn't who I am." Not out of confidence, out of desperation. That night I blocked the realtor, deleted Mason's number, again, turned off all my notifications and slept with my phone in another room. And in the silence, I heard myself breathing. That's when the rebuilding began. Not the big, triumphant kind you post on social media. The slow, anonymous kind. I went back to therapy. I told Alina about the rage dreams, the ones where I screamed at my family and finally felt heard. I picked up yoga. My body ached at first. Then it softened. Then it moved. And one day, I cried during Savasana. Not because I was sad, because I felt my body again. I started journaling. 1 entry every night. No filter. Just truth. I changed the sheets. I painted the kitchen. I walked Bentley at sunrise instead of sunset, just to change the rhythm. And I wrote a letter to Eliza. Never sent it, but I wrote it. And when I finished, I burned it in a ceramic bowl and scattered the ashes in my herb garden. Not for revenge, for release. Then came the mini twist. 6 months after the breakup, my cousin Lily got married. She invited everyone, including Eliza. I almost didn't go. But I had a new dress. My hair was healthy again. I had done the work. I thought I was ready. The venue was a vineyard outside Franklin, air thick with magnolia and champagne. I arrived early, sipped a spritzer, smiled at a few familiar faces, and then I saw her. Eliza, perfect blowout, backless dress. The exact same shade of rose I'd picked for my own bridesmaids in a mood board months before the breakup. She walked in like nothing happened. No shame, no pause. And as she passed me, she said, "Wow, you look good. I'm glad you're doing better." That smile, that tone, like she was congratulating me for surviving her. I felt the room tilt, all the therapy, all the healing, all the dignity. I could feel it slipping. My chest burned, my fists clenched. But then I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw it. The cracks. The way her smile faltered a split second too soon. The way she kept checking her phone. The slight tremble in her champagne glass. She hadn't won. She was just louder about pretending. That night, I cried again. Not because she'd hurt me. Because I let myself believe I was done healing. And healing isn't a line you cross. It's a spiral staircase. Some days you climb, some days you circle back. But the view changes, and so do you. So I made a decision. A necessary one. I cut off my family. Not forever. But until I could exist around them without bleeding. My parents didn't take it well. Mom called it dramatic. Dad just sighed. But I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I simply chose myself. And that choice, small, painful, and quiet, was the most powerful thing I'd done in years. 3 months later, I met David. At a fundraiser for an arts education nonprofit. He was setting up folding chairs wrong, and I corrected him gently. He smiled like I'd told a joke. And when he looked at me, it wasn't hungry or hesitant. It was open. We talked about books, about grief, about how he used to read Hemingway to his late wife when she was sick. I didn't fall in love that night, but I remembered how it felt to be seen without being studied, and that was enough, for now. By the end of that year, I'd redesigned my business, taken a solo trip to Marfa, and finally, put the ring Mason gave me in a donation box. Not to punish the past, to make space for what was coming, because something was. I could feel it, like breath before the words, like wind before the change. Reinvention doesn't arrive with applause. It shows up in the quiet. In a Tuesday morning where nothing hurts. In a Wednesday where your reflection feels familiar again. I woke up one spring morning and realized I no longer needed to tell the story to prove I'd survived it. The rage had softened. The ache had thinned. And in its place was space. Glorious, untouched space. I filled it with things that made me feel alive. I changed my morning routine. No more checking emails in bed. No more scrolling through curated lives that reminded me of everything I wasn't. Instead, I walked Bentley at sunrise. Just me, him, and the hush of Nashville before the city opened its eyes. I started playing music in the kitchen again. Jazz, soul. Even the old records Mason never liked. I danced barefoot while the coffee brewed. I painted my toenails red. I didn't wait for someone to notice. I did it for me. My studio became a sanctuary. I rebranded everything. New logo, new clients, new rates that finally matched my worth. I stopped apologizing for being expensive. My work wasn't a side project anymore. It was a signature. People started recognizing my name in the design circuit. I got featured in Southern Spaces, booked 6 months in advance. The same girl who once begged for closure from a man now built dream homes for women learning to start over. Divorcees, widows, second chancers. I became the woman I once needed. And in that strength, I found softness again. David came back into the picture slowly. After our first meeting at the fundraiser, we exchanged emails. Just friendly at first. We'd send each other links, books we were reading, podcasts we liked, quiet observations about grief and regrowth. He was a widower, lost his wife to cancer 4 years prior. His pain wasn't identical to mine, but it made his words slower, more intentional. He never pushed, never probed, just stayed consistent. One afternoon I met him for coffee, no expectations. We sat on the patio of a quiet cafe on Belmont Boulevard, sunlight filtering through the awning. We talked about solitude, about how strange it is to build a life from rubble. At one point he said, "You strike me as someone who knows how to build beauty from broken things." It wasn't a pickup line. It was a recognition. That night, I cried, not out of sadness, but because I felt seen in a way that didn't demand performance. We dated like grown-ups, no games, no testing waters. We asked real questions. We listened. And in the soft folds of each other's pasts, we built something new, patient and rooted. He wasn't trying to heal me. He just gave me room to do it myself. He met Georgia and passed her unspoken test. He walked Bentley with me, even in the rain. When I got a call from my mom one night, her voice trembling, asking if I'd consider attending Eliza's engagement party, I hung up without guilt. And when I told David about it, he didn't offer advice. He just said, "You don't owe anyone your peace." That's when I knew. Not that he was perfect, but that I was. For me, I no longer needed permission to protect myself. One weekend, we took a trip to the Smokies. No phones, just trails, rain-soaked trees, and the hush of something ancient holding us. At night, we built a fire, drank wine, watched lightning bugs blink like Morse code in the dark. And for the first time in years, I felt still, fully still, not waiting for the next text, not wondering what they were doing, not preparing for the next heartbreak, just breathing. But peace has its own weather. And I could feel the shift before I saw the storm. The first raindrop was a forwarded email. From Georgia. Subject: Look who just RSVP'd. It was a photo, a screenshot of the guest list for my upcoming wedding. And there they were: Mason Whitmore, Eliza Harris. My stomach turned. I hadn't invited them. I wouldn't have. But the venue's public registry system allowed +1s to fill in details once the main guest RSVP'd. And David's family? Massive. A few of his cousins were mutual friends with people Eliza knew from college. Someone must have let the link circulate. And just like that, the past had found its crack in the door. I stared at the screen for a long time. At first, I wanted to delete it, ignore it, let it be. But peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the decision to choose truth over comfort. So I told David. I showed him the list. He blinked once, then leaned back in his chair. "Well?" he said calmly. "I guess they'll see the life they didn't get to ruin." That should have been the end of it. But something lingered in my chest like a thorn. Because I didn't just want them to see. I wanted them to understand. Not through revenge. Not through pettiness, but through the undeniable power of becoming untouchable. So I did nothing. I didn't uninvite them, didn't call my mom, didn't vent to Georgia. I let it unfold. Not because I was weak, but because I was ready. I'd spent so long healing, hiding, rebuilding. Now for the first time I felt like myself again. Not the version I curated for Mason. Not the sister who dimmed herself so Eliza wouldn't feel small. Just me. Ivanka. Clear-eyed. Steady. The girl who once sobbed in a bathtub now planned her wedding with joy, not caution. I picked a dress that didn't apologize for my body. Bold shoulders. Low back. Ivory satin that whispered grace and thunder. I walked into every fitting, every florist consult, every menu tasting with full authority. And the day before the wedding, while everyone else fluttered around with last-minute details, I sat by the window with a glass of champagne, staring out over the Nashville skyline. Bentley snored by my feet. David's jacket hung on the chair beside me. And in that golden hour glow, I thought, let them come. Let them see. Because I wasn't the woman they broke anymore. I was the one who rose. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, they'd see exactly what they lost. The air in the ballroom had changed. Not loud, not tense, but different, like the way a lake stills before a summer storm, surface glassy, wind holding its breath. I stood near the edge of the dance floor, bouquet still in hand, the spotlight softening everything except the eyes watching me. My husband, David, had just finished his speech, simple and stunning, and the applause had barely faded when the first dance music started to swell. He turned to me, reached for my hand. But before I stepped into his arms, someone else did. And that someone wasn't Eliza. Mason, 3 steps forward, smooth as silk. No hesitation. Just him, standing a few feet away, in the same navy suit he left me in. For a second, it felt like no time had passed at all, until he opened his mouth. "I just need a moment," he said, voice steady, low. Just one. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even an interruption. It was a plea. I looked at him, and time fractured. Suddenly, I was back in that kitchen with the letter. Back in that sunroom with Eliza's voice too loud. Back in the silence where love used to live. But now? Now I was different. So I nodded. One moment. We stepped off the dance floor and into the quiet curve of the hallway just outside the ballroom. David didn't follow. He didn't flinch. He knew this wasn't about threat. It was about closure. Mason stood with his hands in his pockets like a man waiting for a train that wouldn't come. I didn't speak. Let him earn it. Finally, he looked up. "You look—" He trailed off, swallowed. "You look extraordinary." I didn't thank him, didn't smile. He took a breath, looked down at the polished floor, then back at me. I wanted to say, "I didn't come to cause anything. When I heard about your wedding, I needed to see it. I needed to see you." I tilted my head slightly. "Why?" His jaw clenched, just for a second. That flicker of self-defense he used to wear when I called out something too close to the truth. Because I've never stopped thinking about it. About what I did, who I was, and who you were to me. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. He looked past me, back toward the ballroom. "That man you married, he sees you, the way I should have." He paused, braced himself, "And I just want to say I'm sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve any of it." He looked at me then, not like the man who left, like the man who stayed haunted. I could have said 100 things. I could have demanded answers, asked what she had that I didn't, asked if he ever looked back with regret. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about Eliza, or even about the apology. This was about a mirror. He was staring into one, and realizing how small he'd become inside of it. So I took a step closer. Just one. And in the quietest, clearest voice I had, I said, "You didn't break me, Mason. You freed me to become someone you could never reach." And that was it. His shoulders dropped. The apology froze mid-exhale. Something cracked in his eyes, like a man realizing the house he burned down had been his only shelter. I didn't stay to watch him fall apart. That was never mine to carry. I walked back into the ballroom, past tables of laughter and candlelight, through air thick with roses and redemption. David stood waiting, calm, steady, my lighthouse. I reached for his hand, and as we stepped onto the floor for our first dance, I caught a glimpse of Eliza through the crowd. She was watching too. A flute of untouched champagne in her hand, smile painted on like always. But the edges were cracking. She stood there in her ivory dress, the one meant to upstage, to provoke. But she looked unfinished, like a girl who brought the wrong weapon to the wrong war. She didn't come over. She didn't say a word. Because what do you say to someone who survived you? What do you say to the woman who bloomed in the soil you tried to salt? The music began. I let David pull me into the moment, into the rhythm of something real. Something earned. The crowd faded, the noise dimmed, and for the first time in years, I danced without ghosts. 3 days after the wedding, I found the letter in my desk drawer. Cream stationery, folded twice, sealed but never addressed. I'd written it a year after the breakup, on a quiet morning when the pain still flared up like a pulled muscle. It wasn't angry. It wasn't poetic. Just honest. Raw. One last exhale from the woman who had been left behind. I don't remember what I wrote exactly, only that I meant every word when I sealed it, and every word became irrelevant the moment I saw myself on that dance floor, whole, soft, and unshaken. I didn't open the letter. Didn't need to. I burned it in the fireplace that evening, one flickering corner at a time, until only soft ash remained. No ceremony. No music. Just peace. David and I stayed at a little lakeside cabin for our honeymoon. No Wi-Fi, no itinerary, just a hammock, a rowboat, and hours where time had no interest in passing. One afternoon, I sat barefoot on the dock, watching ripples move across the water, while Bentley chased a butterfly along the edge. David was inside, making tea, humming something under his breath, a soft sound I'd grown to love. And as the sun dipped behind the cypress trees, I realized I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. Not for an apology. Not for an explanation. Not even for closure. Because I'd made peace with the truth. There are some betrayals that don't come to hurt you. They come to redirect you. And if you're lucky, if you're willing, you grow into the version of yourself they never thought you'd survive to become. I don't talk to Eliza. Not because I hate her, but because she no longer fits inside the story I'm writing. She sent a message after the wedding. Just one line. "You looked beautiful. I'm happy for you." I didn't respond. Some silences are sacred, and some bridges are meant to stay ash. Nashville feels different now. Maybe it's the way I walk through it. Head up, spine tall, no longer rehearsing conversations I'll never have. I still pass places that used to sting. The coffee shop where Mason first told me he loved me. The lake trail where Eliza laughed too loudly. The house I left behind. But they don't haunt me anymore. They've become landmarks in a city I reclaimed. Pages I turned without tearing. Georgia and I started a tradition. Every first Sunday of the month, we pick a new place to try. Always local, always loud, always filled with the kind of women who speak in full laughs and unapologetic opinions. Last month, she made a toast. Glass raised high. "To the girls who rise," she said. "Even when no one roots for them." We clinked glasses and I smiled. Not the polite kind. The kind that starts in the gut and reaches the eyes. Sometimes late at night, I'll sit in the quiet of our new home and look at the life I built. A life I chose. A man who chose me. Not out of pity, not for the version I could become, but for the woman I already was. He keeps a photo of us on his desk. Not the posed wedding shot. The candid one. The one where we're laughing mid-spin during the reception. My head thrown back, his hand steady at my waist. Confetti in my hair. People say I look radiant in that photo. I think I just look free. Healing didn't make me fearless. It made me deliberate. I don't move to prove anything now. I move because I've earned stillness. And when people ask me if I've forgiven Mason and Eliza, I say this. I don't need to forgive them. I simply outgrew the pain. Every life has before and after. Mine is drawn between the girl who waited to be chosen and the woman who chose herself. And that choice, simple and seismic, changed everything. This was Velvet Revenge. If this story hit something real, let me know where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you haven't yet, tap subscribe. We've got more stories to tell. Thank you for watching.